Admiral Keth Valdris pressed his six-fingered hand against the reinforced viewing port of the hegemony ascendant, watching the blue-green marble rotate lazily in the void. The preliminary reports scattered across his command console painted a picture so mundane it bordered on insulting. Primitive chemical propulsion, fragmented political structures, energy production still dependent on burning fossilized organic matter. The third planet from this unremarkable yellow star should have been processed weeks ago. "Admiral!" Intelligence Coordinator Nex Thorian approached with the measured gait of someone delivering routine paperwork. Her chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the ship's artificial illumination, compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays that surrounded them. "The final assessment of target designation Sol 3 is ready for your approval." Valdris didn't turn from the viewport. In his 3 centuries of service to the hegemony, he had overseen the integration of 417 worlds. Some resisted with crude atomic weapons. Others surrendered after witnessing a single demonstration of plasma bombardment. A precious few possessed technology interesting enough to warrant careful study before absorption. This blue world appeared to offer nothing beyond basic mineral extraction and perhaps some biological specimens for the Empire's research divisions. "Threat assessment?" he asked, though the question felt perfunctory. "Minimal," Thorian replied, her voice carrying the slight harmonic distortion common to her species. "Chemical rockets capable of reaching their natural satellite. Primitive nuclear weapons with yields barely registering on our sensors. Most sophisticated defensive installation appears to be something they call NORAD, buried in a mountain, operating with technology our ancestors abandoned millennia ago." The Admiral finally turned, his silver-scaled features impassive. "Population? Approximately 8 billion sapients. Remarkably diverse genetic structure for a single-world species, though they've managed to achieve basic inter-regional communication networks. No unified planetary government, they're still divided into nearly 200 separate political entities, many in active or passive conflict with each other." Valdris moved to his command throne, the biomechanical interface responding to his presence by extending neural link tendrils. As the connection established, data streams flowed directly into his consciousness. Orbital mechanics, atmospheric composition, preliminary biological analyses. Everything confirmed Thorian's assessment. Sol 3 was a backwater world populated by a fractured species that had barely achieved spaceflight. Estimated integration time frame? Standard Protocol 7 should suffice, Thorian said, consulting her data tablet. Demonstration of superior firepower, followed by negotiation with the most technologically advanced political entities. The Hegemony Council estimates complete administrative integration within 18 standard months. Valdris nodded absently, his attention already shifting to more pressing matters. The Viridian cluster required 3 additional battle groups to suppress the ongoing rebellion there, and reports from the Outer Rim suggested the Kithaeron Confederacy might be mobilizing for another territorial dispute. Sol 3 was exactly the kind of routine operation he could delegate to a junior flag officer. Very well, file the assessment and forward integration protocols to Battle Group Tertius. Admiral Keck can handle this personally. It might prove educational for someone of his limited experience. But as Thorian turned to leave, a soft chime echoed through the bridge. Communications Officer Dral Henwick looked up from his station, mandibles clicking with mild confusion. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Deep-Range Reconnaissance Probe DR-7741. "The probe monitoring the Sol system?" Valdris asked, one scaled eyebrow rising slightly. "Yes, sir. The data package. It's unusually large. The probe seems to have recorded significant electromagnetic activity emanating from Sol 3 over the past 72 hours. Valdris felt the first stirring of interest he'd experienced all day. "Electromagnetic activity?" Henwick's forearms moved across his console with practiced efficiency, translating the probe's compressed data into visual formats the bridge crew could interpret. Broad-spectrum communications bursts, sir. Highly organized, clearly artificial, and extensive. The probe's analysis suggests coordinated transmission between multiple points across the planet's surface. Show me. The bridge's main holographic display materialized above them, showing Sol 3 as a rotating sphere marked with thousands of pulsing light points. The lights weren't random. They formed clear patterns, networks that spanned continents and oceans. More disturbing still, the transmission patterns showed remarkable sophistication. Frequency-hopping spread spectrum, quantum entanglement-assisted encryption, and signal architectures that suggested an intimate understanding of long-range communication theory. "How long has this activity been occurring?" Valdris asked, his voice carefully controlled. "According to the probe's historical logs, these communication patterns have been intensifying steadily over the past 4 standard months," Henwick reported. "But, sir, there's something else." The probe detected focused energy emissions directed towards several nearby star systems, including our current position. The bridge fell silent. Thorian's compound eyes fixed on the display, her exoskeleton plates shifting with barely suppressed agitation. "That's impossible. Our preliminary surveys showed no evidence of advanced communication technology." Valdris stood slowly, his neural interface automatically disconnecting as ice-cold realization began to creep through his thoughts. "Henwick, show me the communication vectors." New lines appeared on the holographic display, thin streams of coherent energy reaching out from Sol 3 toward various points in space. Valdris counted 17 distinct transmission beams, each aimed at star systems known to harbor hegemony assets. "Sir?" Henwick's voice carried a note of professional concern that made every officer on the bridge turn toward him. 3 of those transmission vectors are aimed directly at our current patrol route. Based on signal propagation analysis, they began transmitting toward our position approximately 6 months ago. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. 6 months ago, the hegemony had classified Sol 3 as a target for integration. 6 months ago, the initial survey fleet had been dispatched. 6 months ago, long before any official contact, the inhabitants of Sol 3 had begun broadcasting directly toward hegemony positions. "Intelligence Coordinator Thorian," Valdris said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had earned him command of the hegemony's most elite battle group. "I want a complete re-evaluation of our intelligence on Sol 3. Everything: geological surveys, biological analyses, technological assessments, cultural studies, and I want it done by officers who have never seen the original reports. Sir, with respect, that will require—" "I don't care what it requires," Valdris's voice echoed through the bridge, causing several junior officers to flinch. "The inhabitants of a supposedly primitive world are broadcasting toward our positions with technology that shouldn't exist. Either our intelligence gathering is catastrophically incompetent, or we're dealing with something far more dangerous than we realized." As if summoned by his words, another alert chimed through the ship's communication system. This time it was Senior Tactical Analyst Vryn Korath, her image appearing on a secondary display. Her usually calm demeanor showed cracks of genuine unease. "Admiral, I've been conducting a deeper analysis of the probe's sensor logs. We need to discuss the energy signatures coming from Sol 3. Proceed." "Sir, the electromagnetic emissions aren't just communications. We're detecting controlled fusion reactions occurring at multiple points across the planet's surface. Not the crude fusion attempts our initial surveys documented, but clean, efficient reactions producing energy outputs consistent with late-stage civilization technology." Valdris felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How many fusion sources?" "At least 2,000 discrete locations, Admiral, and they're not concentrated in the major population centers. They appear to be distributed in a carefully planned network that would be extremely difficult to disrupt with conventional orbital bombardment." The bridge crew exchanged glances, laden with implications none of them wanted to voice. A civilization capable of deploying thousands of fusion reactors in a defensive grid was not the primitive society described in their intelligence reports. Furthermore, Korath continued, spectral analysis suggests these reactors are using fuel compositions we've never encountered. The energy output is consistent with matter-antimatter annihilation, but the containment signatures suggest a methodology entirely different from standard hegemony or confederacy approaches. Valdris moved back to the viewing port, staring at Sol 3 with new eyes. The blue-green world looked exactly the same, but now it seemed to be watching him back. How long would it take to deploy a network of that magnitude? Assuming they began construction with the technology levels documented in our initial surveys. Centuries, Admiral, possibly longer. The implications were staggering. Either the inhabitants of Sol 3 had been concealing advanced technology for generations, or the hegemony's intelligence apparatus had failed so completely that they'd missed the development of a late-stage civilization in their own galactic neighborhood. Admiral Communications Officer Henwick spoke up again, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're receiving a transmission from Sol 3. It's addressed to you personally." Every head on the bridge turned toward the communications station. Valdris felt his heart skip a beat, plural, as his species possessed two cardiovascular organs, both now racing with adrenaline. "That's impossible," he said. "Our ship identities are classified. Our personal details are encrypted beyond any primitive civilization's ability to decode. Nevertheless, sir, the transmission specifically requests an audience with Admiral Keth Valdris, commanding officer of the hegemony vessel Ascendant, currently positioned at coordinates that matched their location to within a fraction of a percentage point." Valdris was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Then, with the calm of a career military officer facing the impossible, he said, "Put it through." The bridge's main display shimmered, and a human face appeared. Male, middle-aged by their species' standards, with graying hair and eyes that held an intelligence Valdris found immediately unsettling. The human wore what appeared to be a formal military uniform, though the design was unlike anything in the hegemony's cultural databases. "Admiral Valdris," the human said, his voice carrying clearly through the universal translators. "My name is General Harrison Blackwood, Supreme Allied Commander of the Terran Defense Initiative. I believe we need to talk." The silence on the bridge stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Valdris found his voice. "How do you know who I am?" General Blackwood's smile was neither friendly nor hostile. It was the expression of a poker player who had just revealed a winning hand. "Admiral, we've known about the hegemony for a very long time. We've been preparing for this conversation for over 70 years. 70 years, Thorian whispered, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. "That's impossible. First contact protocols clearly state that no civilization achieves interstellar awareness without first developing technologies that would be obvious to your survey protocols," Blackwood interrupted smoothly. "Yes, we're familiar with your first contact procedures. We wrote the manual you're following." Valdris felt the deck beneath his feet seem to shift, though he knew the ship's artificial gravity remained perfectly stable. "What did you say?" "The Hegemony's Standard Integration Protocol 7, Admiral. Section 4, Subsection 12. Primitive civilizations will be evaluated based on their most advanced visible technologies, with particular attention paid to energy generation, propulsion systems, and defensive capabilities. We've been giving you exactly what you expected to see." The general's image leaned forward slightly, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Admiral Valdris, what you're looking at isn't a primitive world stumbling toward its first contact with galactic civilization. What you're looking at is the most sophisticated deception operation in recorded history." Valdris sank into his command throne, his mind reeling. "You're claiming that your entire civilization has been acting, Pretending to be primitive? Not pretending, Admiral. Preparing. Blackwood's expression grew serious. When we first detected hegemony scout ships in our outer system nearly a century ago, we faced a choice. We could reveal ourselves as the technological equals we actually were and risk immediate invasion by a superior force. Or we could appear to be exactly what you expected to find, a divided, primitive world that posed no threat to galactic stability. The implications crashed over Valdris like a tidal wave. The political divisions, the technological limitations, the resource conflicts, all carefully orchestrated to match your psychological profiles of primitive civilizations, Blackwood confirmed. We spent decades studying your integration procedures, Admiral. We know exactly how the hegemony evaluates potential threats because we've been watching you integrate other worlds for the better part of a century. Intelligence Coordinator Thorian stepped forward, her voice shaking with something between fury and fear. That's impossible. You would have needed faster-than-light capabilities, advanced sensor networks, signals intelligence operations spanning multiple star systems, all of which we've had for over 200 years, Blackwood said calmly. The technologies you've catalogued as our most advanced capabilities are what we use for basic maintenance on our garbage collection systems. Valdris forced himself to ask the question that was burning in his throat. What is humanity's actual technological level? General Blackwood paused, and for the first time since the transmission began, his confident demeanor showed a crack of something that might have been sympathy. Admiral, you're familiar with the Kardashev scale? Of course, a primitive measurement system that rates civilizations by their energy consumption capabilities. We surpassed Type 2 approximately 60 years ago, Blackwood said quietly. We're currently constructing our fourth Dyson swarm around stars within 50 light-years of Sol. The bridge of the hegemony ascendant fell into stunned silence. Type 2 civilizations were the stuff of theoretical speculation, cultures capable of harnessing the entire energy output of their home star. The hegemony itself, despite controlling thousands of worlds, barely qualified as a Type 1 civilization. You're lying, Valdris whispered. Admiral, at this very moment, you're surrounded by approximately 47,000 cloaked vessels ranging in size from single-person reconnaissance craft to dreadnoughts that dwarf your flagship. Blackwood's voice remained perfectly calm. If I were lying, would I really need to continue this conversation? Tactical Officer Korath's station erupted in alerts. Admiral, massive decloaking event. Contacts appearing on all vectors. The main display split, showing local space around the Ascendant. What had been empty void moments before now swarmed with ships. Not the crude, angular designs Valdris had expected from the preliminary reports, but sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around their hulls, incorporating design principles that belonged to civilizations thousands of years more advanced than anything in hegemony records. Jesus Christ! Someone whispered, and Valdris realized with shock that it had been him, using a human expletive his universal translator had somehow absorbed from the transmission. Admiral, General Blackwood continued, apparently oblivious to the chaos erupting on the hegemony bridge, I want you to understand something very important. This isn't an ambush. This isn't a trap. This is a job interview. A what? Valdris managed to croak. Humanity has been watching the hegemony's expansion for over a century, Admiral. We've observed your integration protocols, your administrative efficiency, your relatively benevolent treatment of conquered species. We've concluded that the hegemony represents the closest thing to enlightened galactic governance currently available. Blackwood leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled before him. What we're offering you, Admiral Valdris, is a partnership. The hegemony provides political structure and administrative experience across thousands of worlds. Humanity provides technological advancement that will revolutionize your civilization's capabilities. And if we refuse? Valdris asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Then you're free to leave, Blackwood said with a slight shrug. We'll continue our masquerade of primitiveness. You'll file your reports recommending integration, and in 18 months, when your battle group Tertius arrives to begin Standard Protocol 7, we'll have this same conversation with Admiral Keck. The casual mention of their classified operational plans sent another chill through Valdris's consciousness. These humans weren't just technologically superior. They had penetrated hegemony intelligence so thoroughly that they knew operational details that should have been impossible to access. However, Blackwood continued, I should mention that Admiral Keck's psychological profile suggests he would be far less flexible in his approach to unexpected situations. We'd prefer to work with someone who demonstrates the intellectual adaptability necessary for the challenges ahead. Challenges? Thorian asked, finding her voice. General Blackwood's expression grew grave. The hegemony isn't the only galactic power we've been monitoring, Intelligence Coordinator. The Vraxian Imperium's expansion vector will intersect with hegemony space within the next 15 years. When that happens, you're going to need every advantage you can get. The Vraxians. Valdris felt his blood chill at the name. The hegemony's intelligence services had been tracking the Imperium's relentless expansion for decades, but their technology and military doctrine remained largely mysterious. What was known was terrifying. Entire star systems stripped of resources, populations either enslaved or eliminated, and a military philosophy that viewed diplomacy as a weakness to be exploited. You know about the Vraxians? Valdris asked. Admiral, we've been fighting them for the past 40 years, Blackwood said quietly. Why did you think we developed our cloaking technology? The pieces began falling into place in Valdris's mind like a horrific puzzle. The missing colony ships, the dead systems on the rim. The hegemony has been attributing those losses to navigation errors and natural disasters. No, Admiral. You've been attributing them to Vraxian raids because your intelligence services didn't want to admit that a completely unknown hostile force was operating in your territory. Blackwood's voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much death. Humanity has been conducting a covert war against Vraxian advance forces for decades, trying to buy the galaxy time to prepare for what's coming. That's impossible, Valdris protested. Our intelligence networks would have detected military operations of that magnitude. Would they? Blackwood asked. You missed the development of a Type 2 civilization in your own galactic neighborhood. You missed the construction of multiple Dyson swarms. You missed the deployment of 47,000 warships around your flagship. Forgive me, Admiral, but I'm not particularly impressed with hegemony intelligence capabilities. Duh! The brutal honesty of the statement struck Valdris like a physical blow. Everything he thought he knew about humanity, about the hegemony's place in the galaxy, about the nature of interstellar civilization itself, had been revealed as a carefully constructed illusion. What do you want from us? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What we want, Admiral, is to prevent the Vraxian Imperium from turning this entire galactic arm into a lifeless wasteland, Blackwood replied. The hegemony has something humanity lacks, experience governing diverse species across multiple star systems. We have something the hegemony lacks, the technological capability to fight a Type 2 civilization and win. General Blackwood stood, and his image seemed to grow more imposing despite the holographic medium. What we're proposing is a merger, Admiral Valdris. Not conquest, not integration, not absorption, a true partnership between equals. The hegemony provides governmental structure and species relations expertise. Humanity provides military technology and strategic intelligence about the Vraxian threat. And if the Hegemony Council refuses, Blackwood's smile was grim. Then in 15 years, when the Vraxian main battle fleet arrives, you'll discover what happens to Type 1 civilizations that encounter Type 2 military technology without adequate preparation. He paused, Based on our observations of previous encounters, approximately 94% of your population will be dead within 6 months. The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's life support systems. Valdris stared at the human general, trying to process the magnitude of what he was being told. Humanity wasn't just more advanced than the hegemony. They were operating on a level that made the hegemony's entire military doctrine obsolete. "You've been watching us for decades," Valdris said slowly. "You know our capabilities, our strategies, our weaknesses. Why reveal yourselves now?" "Because time is running out," Blackwood replied simply. "Vraxian long-range reconnaissance drones have begun penetrating the outer systems. Based on their expansion patterns, we estimate they'll launch their main offensive within the next 2 years. If we're going to mount an effective defense, we need to begin integrating our forces immediately." Communications Officer Henwick looked up from his station, his expression confused. "Admiral, I'm receiving additional transmissions from SOL-3. Multiple channels, all using different encryption protocols. The volume is enormous." "Show me the analysis," Valdris ordered. Henwick's display showed a web of communication streams flowing from Earth to various points throughout the galaxy. But these weren't the random patterns of a primitive civilization. They were clearly coordinated, systematic, and targeted towards specific star systems. "Sir," Henwick said, his voice growing increasingly strained, "I'm showing active communication links to over 300 different star systems. Many of these are deep in hegemony space, including several that house major military installations." Valdris turned back to General Blackwood's image. "You have agents throughout hegemony territory." "We have friends, Admiral. Civilizations that have been quietly contacted over the past several decades and offered the same choice we're offering you today. Partnership in preparation for the Vraxian threat, or face that threat alone." "How many?" Thorian asked, her voice hollow. "Currently, 87 hegemony member species have established covert communication with the Terran Defense Initiative," Blackwood replied matter-of-factly. "Approximately 60% of your military production capacity is already being coordinated through our logistical networks." The revelation struck Valdris like a quantum torpedo. Nearly 2/3 of the hegemony's military infrastructure was already secretly working with humanity. The scope of the deception was beyond anything he had imagined possible. "This is treason," he whispered. "You're describing the systematic subversion of galactic civilization." "No, Admiral," Blackwood said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "What we're describing is salvation. The Vraxian Imperium has destroyed 18 different galactic civilizations over the past millennium. They strip entire stellar regions of resources, eliminate or enslave native populations, and leave behind nothing but dead worlds and empty space." General Blackwood moved closer to his transmission device, his image looming over the hegemony bridge. "Admiral Valdris, I'm going to show you something that our long-range reconnaissance vessels recorded 6 months ago. I want you to understand exactly what we're all facing." The display changed, showing a star system Valdris didn't recognize. 3 planets orbited an orange dwarf star, with what appeared to be the remains of orbital infrastructure scattered throughout the system. But as the image resolution increased, the true horror became apparent. "This was the Catharan system," Blackwood narrated, "home to approximately 14 billion sapients of 6 different species. 3 months ago, they had technology roughly equivalent to the hegemony's middle-tier member worlds. Last week, our scouts found this. The planets were grey, lifeless spheres. The orbital infrastructure wasn't scattered. It had been systematically disassembled down to the molecular level. Even the system's asteroid belt had been strip-mined until nothing remained but empty space. 14 billion souls," Blackwood said quietly. "Gone. Not relocated, not enslaved, completely eliminated. The Vraxians didn't even bother to preserve the infrastructure. They consumed the entire system and moved on. Intelligence Coordinator Thorian made a sound that might have been a sob. How long did this take? Based on the energy signatures our probes detected, approximately 4 standard days. 4 days. An entire star system with 14 billion inhabitants reduced to nothing in 4 days. Valdris felt his worldview crumbling as the true scope of the threat became clear. "Admiral," Blackwood continued, "the Vraxian advance fleet that destroyed the Catharan system is one of 47 similar battle groups currently moving toward this galactic arm. Based on their current trajectory and speed, they'll reach hegemony core systems within 24 months. 47 battle groups," Valdris repeated numbly. "Each capable of destroying an entire star system within a week," Blackwood confirmed. "Admiral, the hegemony's entire military force couldn't stop a single Vraxian battle group, much less 47 of them." The implications were staggering. Not just defeat, complete extinction. The systematic elimination of every world, every species, every trace of civilization throughout hegemony space. "But you can stop them," Valdris said, though he wasn't sure if he was making a statement or asking a question. "We can try," Blackwood replied. "Humanity has been developing specific counter-technologies for the past 40 years. Our cloaking systems are designed to be undetectable by Vraxian sensors. Our weapon systems are calibrated to penetrate their defensive barriers. Our ship designs incorporate everything we've learned about their tactical doctrine. And you've been testing these technologies against Vraxian forces? For decades, Admiral. The pirate raids and navigation errors your intelligence services have been documenting, those were engagements between human forces and Vraxian advanced scouts. We've been buying time for the galaxy to prepare, one battle at a time." Valdris stood again, pacing to the viewing port where Sol 3 continued its serene rotation. But now he saw it differently, not as a primitive backwater, but as the home base of the most sophisticated military organization in galactic history. "Why?" he asked. "Why fight for civilizations that don't even know you exist?" General Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested he had asked himself the same question many times. "Because, Admiral, we believe that diversity of thought and culture represents the most precious resource in the universe. The Vraxian Imperium seeks to reduce everything to uniformity. One species, one culture, one way of thinking. Humanity considers that the greatest possible tragedy, and the hegemony, despite its flaws, has preserved hundreds of distinct civilizations. You've created a structure where different species can coexist while maintaining their unique characteristics. That's worth preserving, Admiral. That's worth fighting for." Valdris turned back to the display, studying General Blackwood's face. He saw exhaustion there, and determination, and something that might have been hope. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Immediate integration of hegemony and human military forces under unified command," Blackwood replied. "Joint training exercises to prepare for Vraxian tactical doctrine, technology transfer programs to upgrade hegemony defensive capabilities, and most importantly, complete transparency about the threat we're all facing. The Hegemony Council will never approve such drastic changes based on the word of a single human general." "Then it's fortunate that I'm not a single human general," Blackwood said, and for the first time since the transmission began, he smiled genuinely. "Computer, expand transmission to include Allied Command." The display suddenly filled with additional images. Dozens of them, humans in military uniforms, but also beings that Valdris recognized with growing shock. Admiral Thys Kelveran of the Andorian Defense Force, Commander Nerex Volthan of the Rigelian Strategic Command, General Zara Thekis of the Centauri Military Coalition. These weren't just high-ranking officers. They were some of the most respected military leaders in hegemony space, and they were all clearly coordinating with the humans. "Admiral Valdris," General Blackwood said, "I'd like you to meet the Terran Defense Initiative's Allied Command structure. As you can see, humanity is not acting alone in this matter." Admiral Kelvaran stepped forward, her image resolving clearly despite the multi-point transmission. Keth, we've worked together for over 30 years. You know I would never endorse a course of action that threatened hegemony security. Theiss? Valdris whispered. You've been working with them? For the past 8 years, she replied. Since the humans provided early warning about the Vraxian raids in the Outer Rim, without their intelligence, we would have lost the entire Rigel system. Commander Volthan nodded agreement. The technological assistance they've provided has been extraordinary. Our defensive capabilities have improved by orders of magnitude. Orders of magnitude? Intelligence Coordinator Thorian asked. Coordinator, General Blackwood interjected, perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than statistics. Admiral Valdris, I'm going to ask your tactical officer to conduct a full sensor sweep of the space around your vessel. Valdris nodded to Korath, who began operating her console with practiced efficiency. After several moments, she looked up with confusion. Sir, I'm not detecting any of the vessels that appeared during the decloaking event. Sensors show empty space in all directions. Because they're still cloaked, Blackwood explained. Admiral, your sensors are currently unable to detect nearly 50,000 vessels surrounding your position. If this were a hostile encounter, your flagship would have been destroyed before you realized you were under attack. The demonstration sent a chill through every officer on the bridge. The casual display of technological superiority was more intimidating than any direct threat could have been. But Admiral, Blackwood continued, I want you to understand something very important. Despite our overwhelming tactical advantage, despite our ability to eliminate your entire battle group without warning, we're asking for your cooperation rather than demanding your surrender. Do you understand what that means? Valdris considered the question carefully. It means you need something from us that can't be taken by force. Exactly, Blackwood said, his smile returning. We need legitimacy, Admiral. We need the hegemony's governmental structure, your diplomatic relationships, your administrative experience. We can provide the military technology to defeat the Vraxians, but we can't provide the political framework necessary to govern the galaxy afterward. And you believe the hegemony can? We know you can, Commander Volthan interjected. The humans have been studying your governmental systems for decades. The hegemony represents the most successful large-scale multi-species democracy in recorded history. General Blackwood nodded agreement. What we're proposing isn't human dominance disguised as partnership, Admiral. We're proposing a genuine merger of capabilities. Human military technology and intelligence gathering, combined with hegemony political expertise and administrative experience. Under whose command? Valdris asked. Under joint command, Admiral Kelvaran replied. Military operations coordinated through integrated command structures, with strategic decisions made by consensus among Allied command representatives. Valdris felt himself wavering. The logical part of his mind recognized that what the humans were describing represented the hegemony's only realistic chance of survival against the Vraxian threat. But the emotional part of his psyche struggled with the realization that everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the galaxy had been an elaborate deception. Admiral, General Blackwood said quietly, as if reading his thoughts, I understand your hesitation. We're asking you to trust a species that has been systematically deceiving you for decades. But consider this. If we had hostile intentions toward the hegemony, would we have needed such elaborate deceptions? We could have eliminated your civilization at any point over the past century. Instead, Admiral Kelvaran added, they've been protecting us. The Vraxian raids that have been plaguing the Outer Rim. Human forces have been intercepting and destroying 60% of those incursions before they reach hegemony space. 60%, Thorian asked. The raids you've been detecting represent less than half of the Vraxian forces that have been probing your territory, Blackwood confirmed. Human defense networks have been operating as a buffer zone, absorbing the majority of reconnaissance and raiding attempts. The scope of humanity's secret war was staggering. They had been fighting the hegemony's enemies for decades without recognition, credit, or assistance. "Why?" Valdris asked. "Why protect civilizations that didn't even know you existed?" "Because," General Blackwood said simply, "it was the right thing to do." The answer was so straightforward, so lacking in political calculation or strategic complexity, that it struck Valdris as fundamentally alien. In his experience, civilizations acted based on advantage, resource acquisition, or territorial expansion. The idea of a species that would spend decades fighting a covert war simply because it was morally correct was beyond his understanding of galactic politics. "Admiral," Blackwood continued, "I'm going to transmit a complete intelligence package to your ship. Everything we know about the Vraxian threat, our technological capabilities, our strategic assessments, and our proposed integration timeline. I want you to review it carefully and make your decision based on complete information. And if I decide the risks are too great, then you're free to leave," Blackwood said. "We'll continue our masquerade, and you can report back to the Hegemony Council that Sol 3 represents a minimal threat suitable for Standard Integration Protocol 7. In 18 months, when Admiral Keck arrives, we'll have this same conversation with him. But the Vraxian threat—" General Blackwood's expression grew somber. "Admiral, the Vraxians are coming whether the Hegemony joins us or not. Our projections suggest that without integrated defense, approximately 94% of Hegemony space will be consumed within the first year of their offensive. With integrated defense, we estimate acceptable casualties can be limited to less than 8% of current population." The numbers were stark. Join the humans and suffer significant but manageable losses, or face the Vraxians alone and watch galactic civilization die. "I need to consult with my senior officers," Valdris said. "Of course," Blackwood replied. "Take all the time you need. But, Admiral, I should mention that our long-range reconnaissance assets have detected increased Vraxian activity in the outer systems. We estimate you have approximately 6 weeks before their advance forces reach the point where retreat becomes impossible. 6 weeks to reorganize the entire structure of galactic civilization. 6 weeks to convince the Hegemony Council to abandon centuries of established policy. 6 weeks to prepare for the most significant military challenge in recorded history." "General," Valdris said, "assuming we agree to your proposal, what would be the immediate next steps?" "Integration begins immediately," Blackwood replied. "Joint training exercises for your command staff, technology transfer protocols for your most critical systems, and establishment of secure communication networks throughout Hegemony space. We've already prepared integration packages for every major Hegemony installation." "You've prepared packages for installations you've never officially visited?" Thorian asked, her voice tight with implications. "Coordinator, we've had covert assets operating throughout Hegemony space for over 40 years, Commander Volthan said matter-of-factly. "Every major military installation, every strategic resource depot, every communication hub. We know your defensive capabilities better than you do." Valdris felt another piece of his worldview crumble. "How many of our personnel are actually working for you?" "Working with us," General Blackwood corrected gently. "Approximately 11% of Hegemony military personnel above the rank of Lieutenant Commander have been briefed on the Vraxian threat and are already participating in contingency planning." 11%. More than 1 in 10 of the Hegemony's senior military officers were secretly coordinating with a civilization that officially didn't exist. "Admiral," Communications Officer Henwick spoke up, his voice strained. "I'm receiving priority transmissions from Hegemony Command. They're requesting immediate status reports from all battle groups in this sector." Valdris realized that their extended communication silence must have triggered automatic monitoring protocols. "How long have we been in communication with Sol 3? 47 minutes, sir." 47 minutes, during which his entire understanding of the galaxy had been systematically demolished and rebuilt. It felt like a lifetime. "General Blackwood," Valdris said, "I need to respond to Hegemony Command. What do you recommend I tell them?" "The truth, Admiral," Blackwood replied. "Or at least, as much of it as you think they're prepared to hear." Valdris considered his options. He could report the encounter as planned and wait for the inevitable bureaucratic delays that would doom any chance of effective preparation. Or he could take the most significant risk of his career and begin implementing humanity's proposals immediately. Henwick, establish a secure channel to Fleet Admiral Corex Thane at Hegemony Command. "Aye, sir." The bridge's secondary display activated, showing the lined face of Fleet Admiral Thane. His expression immediately shifted from routine concern to alarm as he took in the unusual activity on Valdris's bridge. "Admiral Valdris, your battle group has been out of communication for nearly an hour. What's your status?" "Fleet Admiral, I need to brief you on a development that will require immediate council attention," Valdris said, choosing his words carefully. "We've made contact with the inhabitants of Sol 3. "Contact?" Thane's eyes narrowed. "Your orders were to conduct preliminary assessment only. First contact protocols require council approval." "Sir, the inhabitants of Sol 3 initiated contact with us. They knew our position, our ship identities, and our mission parameters." The silence from Hegemony Command stretched for nearly 30 seconds. "That's impossible," Thane finally said. "Intelligence reports indicate a primitive civilization with no interstellar capabilities." "Fleet Admiral," Valdris said, "I'm going to transmit our sensor logs and communication records. I believe you'll find them illuminating." As the data transfer completed, Valdris watched Fleet Admiral Thane's expression shift from skepticism to confusion to something approaching panic. "Admiral, these readings show energy signatures consistent with Type 2 civilization technology. How is this possible?" "Sir, it appears that our intelligence assessments were deliberately manipulated by the inhabitants of Sol 3. They've been concealing their true technological capabilities while conducting covert surveillance of hegemony operations." General Blackwood's image appeared on a tertiary display, visible to both Valdris and Fleet Admiral Thane. "Fleet Admiral, my name is General Harrison Blackwood, Supreme Allied Commander of the Terran Defense Initiative. I believe Admiral Valdris has been briefing you on our situation." Thane's face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical under different circumstances. "You're human?" "Yes, sir, and I'm afraid we have some rather urgent matters to discuss." For the next 20 minutes, General Blackwood provided Fleet Admiral Thane with the same briefing he had given Valdris. The Vraxian threat, humanity's covert war, the scope of the deception, and the urgent need for integrated defense planning. When Blackwood finished, Fleet Admiral Thane sat in stunned silence for nearly a full minute. "General," Thane finally said, "what you're describing would require completely restructuring our entire approach to galactic defense." "Yes, sir, it would," Blackwood agreed. "The question is whether you prefer restructuring your defense policies or restructuring your memorial services." The blunt assessment drew a sharp look from Thane, but also a grudging nod of acknowledgement. "Admiral Valdris," Thane said, "I'm ordering you to remain at Sol 3 and continue these discussions. I'll brief the Council immediately, but—" He paused, considering the political implications. "But I suspect they'll want to verify these claims independently." "Fleet Admiral," General Blackwood interjected, "with respect, verification delays could prove catastrophic. Our reconnaissance assets indicate Vraxian advance forces are accelerating their timeline. How much time do we have?" "Best case scenario? 6 weeks before their advanced scouts reach the outer hegemony systems. Worst case? 3 weeks. Fleet Admiral Thane's face drained of color. 3 weeks to reorganize our entire military doctrine. 3 weeks to begin the process, Blackwood corrected. Full integration will take months, but we need to start immediately if we're going to have any chance of mounting an effective defense. I'll convene an emergency council session, Thane said. Admiral Valdris, maintain your position and continue coordination with General Blackwood. I'll transmit council decisions as soon as they're available. The transmission ended, leaving Valdris alone with his staff and the impossible reality they now faced. Admiral, Intelligence Coordinator Thorian said quietly, if even half of what the humans claim is true, then we're facing the most significant threat in galactic history, Valdris finished, and our only chance of survival depends on trusting a species that has been systematically deceiving us for decades. Ldum. Sir, Tactical Officer Korath spoke up, I've been analyzing the technical specifications the humans transmitted. Their defensive capabilities are extraordinary. Show me. Korath's display filled with technical diagrams that looked more like theoretical physics textbooks than practical engineering blueprints. Their shields operate on principles I don't recognize, energy outputs that should be impossible with any known power generation technology. Weapon systems that appear to manipulate space-time itself. Space-time manipulation, Valdris asked. Sir, according to these specifications, human dreadnoughts can create localized gravitational fields sufficient to crush conventional starships. Their fighter craft achieve faster-than-light travel without using traditional jump drives. Their defensive barriers operate by phasing matter into parallel dimensions. The technology descriptions sounded like science fiction, but the mathematical proofs accompanying them were undeniably valid. General Blackwood, Valdris called to the still-active communication channel. These technical specifications describe capabilities that shouldn't be possible. Admiral, everything we've developed has been specifically designed to counter Vraxian technology, Blackwood replied. Conventional energy shields are useless against their weapons. Traditional faster-than-light travel can be tracked by their sensors. Standard defensive strategies fail because they can manipulate local space-time to bypass physical barriers. You're saying the Vraxians possess similar capabilities? The Vraxians developed these technologies thousands of years ago, Blackwood said grimly. What we've done is create counter-technologies specifically designed to neutralize their advantages. Communications Officer Henwick looked up from his station with an expression of professional bewilderment. Admiral, I'm receiving transmission requests from everywhere. Fleet commands throughout hegemony space are requesting immediate briefings on the Sol 3 situation. Word is spreading, Valdris realized. Sir, General Blackwood said, we anticipated this development. If you're willing, we can provide simultaneous briefings to all hegemony command authorities. It would be more efficient than conducting hundreds of individual conversations. You can coordinate transmissions to every major hegemony installation simultaneously. Admiral, we can coordinate transmissions to every hegemony installation, period. Major and minor. We've been maintaining comprehensive communication logs of your entire military network. The casual admission sent another chill through Valdris's consciousness. Humanity had not only infiltrated hegemony space, they had been monitoring every communication, every order, every strategic decision for decades. Very well, Valdris said. Coordinate simultaneous briefings. But, General, I want full transparency about humanity's intelligence operations. No more surprises. Agreed, Blackwood replied. Admiral, you should know that this conversation is being recorded and will be transmitted to every hegemony command authority within the next hour. By tomorrow, every senior military officer in your space will have a complete understanding of the situation. Within minutes, Henwick confirmed that transmission links had been established with every major hegemony installation. The simultaneous briefing that followed lasted nearly 2 hours, with General Blackwood methodically explaining the Vraxian threat, humanity's covert operations, and the urgent need for integrated defense planning. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Fleet commanders demanded additional intelligence. Administrative officials questioned the legal authority for such drastic changes. Strategic planners requested detailed analysis of proposed integration procedures. But underneath the bureaucratic chaos, Valdris detected something else: relief. Relief that someone had been preparing for the threats that hegemony intelligence had been documenting but failing to understand. Relief that the mysterious losses and attacks finally had an explanation. Relief that they weren't facing the unknown alone. "Admiral," Fleet Admiral Thane's voice came through the communication system, "the Council has reached a preliminary decision." "Proceed, sir." "Given the urgency of the situation and the compelling nature of the evidence, the Council is authorizing immediate implementation of joint defense protocols with the Terran Defense Initiative." Valdris felt something that might have been hope stir in his chest. "Full authorization?" "Full authorization," Thane confirmed. "General Blackwood, the Hegemony Council formally requests immediate establishment of joint command structures and accelerated technology transfer protocols." "Fleet Admiral," Blackwood replied, "we're prepared to begin integration immediately. Our logistics coordinators have been standing by for this decision." "Standing by?" Valdris asked. "Admiral, we've been preparing for this moment for over 70 years, Blackwood said. "Integration teams are already en route to every major hegemony installation. Technology transfer packages have been manufactured and staged for immediate deployment. Command integration protocols have been developed and tested." The scope of humanity's preparation was staggering. They had anticipated not just the Vraxian threat, but the exact sequence of events that would lead to this moment. "General," Valdris said slowly, "how long have you known that this conversation would happen exactly as it has?" Blackwood was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been regret. "Admiral, we've been running psychological and strategic simulations of this scenario for decades. We knew that eventually a hegemony officer of sufficient rank and intellectual flexibility would encounter evidence of our operations and demand an explanation. You've been manipulating events to ensure this conversation would occur." "Not manipulating, Admiral. Preparing for. There's a difference." Blackwood paused. "We needed to ensure that when the time came, we would be dealing with hegemony personnel capable of making the necessary strategic adjustments." Valdris realized that his selection for this mission, his psychological profile, even his career trajectory, had probably been influenced by humanity's long-term planning. The thought should have been disturbing, but instead he found it oddly comforting. If humanity had invested decades in ensuring this moment would unfold successfully, it suggested they had extraordinary confidence in the ultimate outcome. "Admiral," Tactical Officer Korath said, "I'm detecting multiple faster-than-light signatures approaching our position, unknown vessel configurations." "Those would be our integration teams," General Blackwood said. "Admiral, with your permission, we'd like to begin immediate technology transfer and command integration procedures." Valdris looked around his bridge, taking in the faces of officers who had served with him for years. They looked back at him with expressions of trust, uncertainty, and determination. "General Blackwood," he said, "permission granted. Let's begin." What followed was the most intensive 48 hours of Valdris's career. Human integration teams materialized throughout hegemony space, bringing with them technologies that revolutionized every aspect of military operations. Communication systems that operated instantaneously across galactic distances, defensive barriers that could absorb energy equivalent to stellar output, weapons that could neutralize targets by manipulating fundamental forces. More importantly, they brought intelligence. Detailed tactical analyses of Vraxian capabilities, strategic assessments of their expansion patterns, and comprehensive plans for coordinated defense. The integration wasn't just technological, it was conceptual. Human strategic doctrine emphasized flexibility, adaptation, and asymmetric thinking. Where hegemony military philosophy focused on overwhelming force and conventional tactics, humanity had developed approaches that turned enemy strengths into weaknesses. "Admiral," Intelligence Coordinator Thorian said during a briefing on the second day. "I've been reviewing the human intelligence assessments of Vraxian capabilities. Their analysis suggests that conventional hegemony tactics would be completely ineffective." Explain. "Sir, the Vraxians apparently develop specific counter-technologies for every opponent they encounter. They study enemy capabilities and create targeted responses. Any civilization that fights them using predictable tactics is systematically neutralized. But humanity's approach? Completely unpredictable," Thorian said with something approaching admiration. "They don't rely on superior technology or overwhelming force. Instead, they use tactics that violate every established principle of military doctrine." General Blackwood, who had established a permanent communication link with the Ascendant, nodded agreement. "Coordinator, conventional military thinking assumes that superior technology and resources determine victory. The Vraxians have based their entire strategic doctrine on that assumption." "And you've proven the assumption wrong?" "We've proven that assumptions can be weaponized," Blackwood replied. "Admiral, may I show you something?" The bridge's main display activated, showing what appeared to be a typical space battle. Vraxian vessels, sleek, angular ships that seemed to absorb light, engaged human forces in what looked like a hopeless mismatch. The Vraxian ships were larger, more heavily armed, and significantly more numerous. But as the engagement progressed, the human forces began implementing tactics that defied conventional understanding. Ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting after taking direct hits. Human vessels appeared to phase in and out of normal space, attacking from impossible angles. Most disturbing of all, destroyed human ships somehow continued to function, their debris fields maintaining coherent tactical formations. "What am I looking at?" Valdris asked. "The Battle of Kepler 442, 18 months ago," Blackwood replied. "A Vraxian battle group encountered a human defense fleet. As you can see, the Vraxians possessed overwhelming technological and numerical superiority. But the human ships are operating according to tactical doctrines that treat conventional physics as suggestions rather than laws." Blackwood finished. "Admiral, when you're facing an enemy that can manipulate space-time, traditional concepts of victory and defeat become meaningless. The battle recording showed human forces achieving what should have been impossible, victory against a technologically superior force through tactics that seemed to violate every principle of space combat." "How?" Valdris whispered. "By accepting that the universe is far stranger and more flexible than most civilizations realize," Blackwood said. "The Vraxians assume their enemies will fight according to predictable patterns. They've never encountered an enemy that treats those patterns as merely starting points for improvisation." Over the following days, similar integration procedures occurred throughout hegemony space. Human technology merged seamlessly with existing hegemony systems, creating hybrid capabilities that exceeded the sum of their parts. More importantly, human tactical doctrine began transforming hegemony strategic thinking. "Admiral," Fleet Admiral Thane transmitted during a comprehensive briefing, "I've been reviewing integration reports from across our space. The technological improvements are extraordinary, but the conceptual changes are even more significant." "How so?" "Sir, our entire approach to military planning has been based on predictable escalation patterns. The humans have introduced variables we never considered. Tactics that shouldn't work, but somehow do. Strategies that violate established doctrine, but achieve impossible results. And the response from our command staff? Mixed," Thane admitted. "Older officers are struggling with concepts that challenge fundamental assumptions. Younger officers are adapting more quickly, but even they're having difficulty accepting some of the more unconventional approaches." General Blackwood's image appeared on the communication channel. "Fleet Admiral, adaptation is always challenging, but consider the alternative, facing the Vraxians with conventional tactics that we know will fail. General, some of your proposed strategies seem to border on—" Thane paused, searching for an appropriate word. "Impossible," Blackwood suggested with a slight smile. Fleet Admiral, impossible is exactly what we're aiming for. The Vraxians have spent millennia developing counters for every possible military strategy. They've never developed counters for impossible strategies. 3 weeks into the integration process, the first test came. Hegemony long-range sensors detected a Vraxian reconnaissance fleet approaching the outer systems. Not the advanced scouts that had been probing their territory for months, but a full reconnaissance force capable of gathering comprehensive intelligence about hegemony defensive capabilities. Admiral, Tactical Officer Korath reported 12 Vraxian vessels on approach vector toward the Rigel system. Configuration suggests advanced surveillance capabilities. Disposition of friendly forces? Joint Human Hegemony Patrol Fleet intercepting, Korath replied. Command structure indicates Admiral Kelvaran is coordinating with human tactical advisors. What followed was the first practical test of integrated operations. Human cloaking technology concealed the joint fleet until the last possible moment. Hegemony vessels provided conventional firepower, while human ships implemented impossible tactical maneuvers. The result was a victory so complete that Vraxian survivors had no opportunity to transmit intelligence about the new defensive capabilities. Admiral, General Blackwood said after reviewing the engagement reports, that was exactly the kind of result we needed. The Vraxians learned nothing about our actual capabilities, but we gained extensive intelligence about their reconnaissance procedures. How extensive? Complete technical specifications for their sensor arrays, communication protocols, and tactical response patterns, Blackwood replied. Information that will be invaluable when their main fleet arrives. But when, not if. Admiral, Vraxian psychology doesn't include concepts like retreat or reconsideration. The failure of their reconnaissance mission will be interpreted as evidence that greater force is required. They'll escalate, and escalate they did. Over the following weeks, Vraxian probes increased in frequency and intensity. Each engagement provided opportunities to test integrated capabilities while revealing more about Vraxian strategic doctrine. But it also provided disturbing insights into the scope of the threat they faced. Admiral, Intelligence Coordinator Thorian reported during a strategic briefing, analysis of captured Vraxian technology suggests their main fleet possesses capabilities that exceed our previous estimates. In what way? Sir, they're not just technologically advanced, they're technologically adaptive. Every piece of equipment we've examined can reconfigure itself to counter specific threats. They don't just build weapons and shields, they build systems that learn and evolve. General Blackwood nodded grimly. That's consistent with our long-term observations. The Vraxians don't just conquer civilizations, they absorb their technologies and integrate useful innovations into their own systems. Meaning that every civilization they've destroyed has made them stronger, Blackwood said. They're not just a military force. They're a technological synthesis of every advanced civilization they've encountered over the past millennium. The implications were staggering. The hegemony wasn't just facing a superior military force. They were facing the accumulated technological achievements of hundreds of extinct civilizations. However, Blackwood continued, there's something the Vraxians have never encountered, a civilization that deliberately appears primitive while secretly developing advanced capabilities. They've never faced an enemy that could convincingly masquerade as technologically inferior while actually possessing superior resources. You're saying humanity's deception campaign provides a tactical advantage? I'm saying it provides the only tactical advantage that matters, Blackwood replied. The Vraxians base their entire strategic doctrine on accurate assessment of enemy capabilities. They've never faced an enemy capable of systematic deception on this scale. 6 weeks after first contact, the moment everyone had been preparing for finally arrived. Admiral, Communications Officer Henwick announced, his voice tight with controlled tension. Long-range sensors are detecting massive, faster-than-light signatures at the edge of hegemony space. Multiple fleet elements, configuration consistent with Vraxian main battle formations. Valdris felt his hearts begin racing as he realized that months of preparation were about to be tested against the most dangerous military force in galactic history. Size of the fleet? Sir, it's not a fleet. It's an armada. Preliminary count suggests over 3,000 vessels, ranging from reconnaissance craft to something that's registering as approximately 50 kilometers in length. 50 kilometers. The largest hegemony dreadnought measured barely 2 kilometers from bow to stern. General Blackwood, Valdris called to the communication channel that had remained open for weeks. Are we ready for this? Admiral, Blackwood replied, and his voice carried the calm confidence of someone who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. We've been ready for this since before you knew we existed. The final battle for the survival of galactic civilization was about to begin, and humanity had spent 70 years making sure they wouldn't face it alone. But as the Vraxian armada approached hegemony space, Admiral Keth Valdris realized that the greatest revelation was yet to come. The humans hadn't just been preparing to defend against the Vraxians, they had been preparing to do something far more ambitious. They had been preparing to end the Vraxian threat permanently, using a strategy so audacious that it defied every principle of military doctrine ever devised. The blue-green world that had appeared so primitive just weeks ago was about to demonstrate why some civilizations choose to hide in plain sight until the moment comes to reshape the galaxy itself.